What's up, everybody? Martha Cross 316 back with another comic book flashback. Today we are looking at the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 82. This issue came out in March of 1970, and today we are looking at the return of Electro. Now, we haven't seen Electro since Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 1, so what has Electro been up to this entire time? Has he been released from jail? We're going to find all this out as we look at this issue today. We're also going to be looking at the love life of Peter Parker. We're going to be looking at his relationship with Flash Thompson, Harry Osborn. We also are going to see the return of a famous female character in this big saga, which is Mary Jane. We have a lot going on, so let's go ahead and dive into this issue. But before we do, got to give credit where credit is due, and we see here that is written by Stan Lee, drawn by John Romita. We have Jim Mooney doing the editing, and then lettering page is by Sam Rosen. So we have right here on the splash page Peter Parker, and he is basically thinking about all of the different scenarios, thinking about, first off, we have Joe Robertson and Captain Stacy. They've been very suspicious about who Spider-Man is. They're trying to uncover the identity of Spider-Man. We have Harry Osborn here. He is basically paying most of the rent, where Peter is barely paying any of it, so he's feeling pretty guilty about that. We have this whole situation with Gwen Stacy. He feels down in the dumps because he can't treat her the way he wants to, and bring her out on expensive dates. He still has this long rivalry with, Flash Thompson that we've known since the very beginning. And so he's trying to figure out why he can't get along with regular guys like Flash Thompson. And then, of course, we have the threat of J. Jonah Jameson, and how every time we have Spider-Man mentioned in the newspaper and the Daily Bugle, it's always negative. So a lot of things are on the mind of Peter Parker, and especially what happened last issue with Aunt May. As we recall, where we saw how Spider-Man had to go after Kangaroo last issue, and so what Peter Parker had to do to get out of the house was to create this web dummy. Well, lo and behold, Aunt May comes across this web dummy in Peter Parker's room, and she passes out. And now he had to tell her that, no, you didn't see a web dummy. That was me. So now Aunt May's doubting her sanity, and so she's sleeping. All of a sudden, Peter Parker hears the doorbell ring, and he opens the door, and it happens to be the Watsons here. We have Anna Watson, and of course her niece, Mary Jane Watson. So Mary Jane is finally back. We haven't seen Mary Jane in quite some time. They both went to Florida, and they've come back because they heard the news about Aunt May and not feeling well. And we know that Anna Watson, of course, is Aunt May's roommate. And so she's come back to take care of Aunt May. And we learned from Mary Jane that they're going to throw this big party for Flash Thompson, and they want Peter Parker to come. And so Mary Jane gives Peter Parker the phone, and he calls Gwen, and she tells him all about it. And so, everybody's chipping in here, a little bit of money here and there just to get to Flash Thompson. And this is what's going to bother Peter Parker, because he's like, you know what, I need to raise some cash for Flash's going away party. So what better way to do it than maybe swing around town and try to find some pictures I can take for the Daily Bugle. And so Peter Parker changes to Spider-Man, and he swings through this big smokestack, and it causes his costume to get all grimy and nasty looking. And so we see here that Harry Osborn is actually shaving his mustache. Thank goodness for that. But we also are trying to figure out, how in the world am I going to get some cash for this going away party? Well, all of a sudden, Spider-Man sees this TV studio here, and he's like, man, that's a great idea. that's a good way for me to try to make some cash here. So he swings on by this studio here, and he offers these guys a chance for them to allow him to be on air, basically, to be on TV. And at first, these guys are doubting that this really is Spider-Man, but we see here that, and of course, he is the original Joe. He is the real McCoy. And they draw up a contract, and they're getting ready here to allow Spider-Man to be on TV. And one person in particular that is at the studio happens to be Max Dillon. And if you know anything about that name, that is Electro, and he is an electrician at this TV studio. Well, there's a lot of wires loose here, and we see here that Max Dillon is able to fix the problem. But of course, if anybody had touched those wires, they would have died instantly. But Max Dillon has that superpower that he had gained back in issue 9. And so we see here that Spider-Man heard of the name of Max Dillon, but he can't put a face to that name. So Spider-Man's going to be scheduled to appear on TV, and Max Dillon learns that Spider-Man is going to appear on this TV, and this is how Max Dillon is going to start plotting to go after Spider-Man. And here's just a little bit of the history of Electro. If you haven't watched my other videos, I reviewed issue number 9, which is his first appearance, as well as their battle in annual number 1. And so go back and watch those videos if you haven't watched them so far. And now let's return to the story. We see here that Max Dillon gets with his parole officer here, and his parole officer heard about what happened at the TV studio and his heroism, and that looks good so far. But Max Dillon doesn't want to be a hero. He wants to get revenge on Spider-Man. And so that's exactly what's going to happen here. And so what we're going to see here is that Max Dillon's trying to plot and trying to figure out what he can do to get back to and get revenge on Spider-Man. Well, he hears J. Jonah Jameson on the TV protesting that Spider-Man is going to be appearing at this TV program, and this is the chance that Max Dillon needs to get revenge on Spider-Man. He's going to appear live on TV, and he's going to try to attack Spider-Man and see if he can unmask Spider-Man for good. And so now we see here that Peter Parker arrives to Flash's party. He picks up Gwen Stacy here, and he's still down in the dumps because he's like, man, I can't even afford to get a taxi for the both of us. We have to take a bus. They arrive on the scene. We have Flash Thompson. He's starting to joke around saying, you know what, Gwen, if you can't keep Peter Parker, how about, I'm a good stray. You can pick me up. He said, I'll be good for laughs. Peter Parker gets offended by what Flash Thompson says. They almost get in a fight, and we have Peter Parker. He walks out of the party here, and so that's not looking good. Well, all of a sudden, now we're at the Daily Bugle, and we see here that Electro, he arrives on the scene offering J. Jonah Jameson a deal here. He said, look, I can unmask Spider-Man on live TV if you'll pay me. I'll do it if you pay me $5,000. And J. Jonah Jameson changes his tune. He's like, that's a deal right there. And so now we have J. Jonah Jameson in on the act. He knows that Electro is going to attack Spider-Man on live TV, and he promises Electro that he will give him $5,000 if he is successful. Now let's catch up with Peter Parker and Gwen, and we see here that Peter Parker's like, I just feel so broke all the time. I can't wine and dine you like I should. But we see here that Gwen Stacy doesn't really care about all that. Instead, all that she really cares about is just being with Peter Parker. And so Peter Parker has a good girlfriend right there. I mean, that's a good understanding girlfriend to have. And so we see that ends up pretty well, that Peter Parker is able to feel comforted by Gwen. So now let's return, and we have here that J. Jonah Jameson invites Joe Robertson and Captain Stacy to this TV program to sit in the audience, and he's all chipper, he's all happy about it. Joe Robertson has his suspicions. We see here that Peter Parker's like, man, I'm going to appear on live TV, and I got this grimy costume. So he goes and he's going to have to get it washed. And so what he does is he puts on this paper sack and he puts it on his head, and he allows his costume to get washed and cleaned so he won't appear on TV in a dirty costume. So now we're at the TV studio. The show is just about to start. Spider-Man swings on down. The TV program is live now. He's on this guy's TV show. All of a sudden, Spider-Man's spider sense starts to tingle, and right off the bat, he is attacked by Electro. Everybody evacuates the scene. We have Joe Robertson. His suspicions are now answered, as we see here that J. Jonah Jameson knew about this attack, and they are the only ones left in the audience as Spider-Man is trying to run away from these electric bolts of Electro. And we see that it's going to be a one grandstand battle here, as we can see. Awesome drawings again, drawn by the great John Romita Sr. here. And so Spider-Man battles Electro, and he short circuits Electro's power, and Electro's power actually defeats Electro. So Electro gets away while Spider-Man is left unconscious. He finally comes to, and then he escapes. He comes back to his apartment, and now we leave now on another depressing note. Peter Parker feeling down in the dumps. He lost his chance to make some money, and also he's thinking about how defeated he feels about not only himself but also the career of Spider-Man. And so that's how we end this issue. Hope you liked it. And next time we're looking at a brand new villain. His name's the Schemer. Who is the Schemer? We're going to find all this out in issue number 83. I hope to see you there. And until next time, keep reading comics.